Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Let me at the outset thank the DG of IDSA, Dr. Arvind Gupta, and the Special Envoy of the Prime Minister of India, Ambassador Rakesh Sood, for inviting me to this very, very important international seminar. It's a great honor and privilege for me to speak before this august audience. What I will do in the next 10 to 15 minutes is to provide you with an assessment and an overview on the politics of nuclear reductions at the bilateral level between the US and Russia, and whether we correspondingly find a correlation with their nuclear doctrines and strategy. I will also highlight and emphasize on the major steps taken by the US and Russia over the years on the nuclear reductions and why we see there is a lack of consistency between the rhetoric and actions. There also seems to be lack of genuine commitment and seriousness on the part of these two countries in particular, especially in terms of adhering to the promises made in the Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, let me reiterate on a point that the worldwide estimates of admitted nuclear weapons as of now in 2014 are still in thousands, despite reductions at various levels and at a different given point in time. There are nuclear weapons which are still on hair trigger alert and have not been de-alerted, despite we have a history of almost a quarter century since the demise of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. The nuclear weapons and its role in international relations have always been a part of discourse among the members of academic and strategic community. Over the years, the whole world has been keenly watching the behavioral patterns of the United States, in particular, and all the other acknowledged nuclear weapon states. Some of the NPT signatories have been highly influenced by the role of nuclear weapons, and the concept of new nuclear nations has been gaining momentum. These are largely because of the doctrine and a strategy which the acknowledged nuclear weapon states time to time evolve and obviously put a lot of emphasis on the nuclear weapons. The debates from the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty to new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty reflect on the one hand about the reductions of nuclear warheads, and on the other hand the progress towards the reduction so far has been very slow and most of the time marred by the differences in the approaches of both the US and Russia. The estimates of the current stockpiles do have a concern among the members of international community about the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. The estimated stockpile of the United States as of now still seem to be quite high, and all of you are aware about the numbers. I don't want to go into the numbers because of paucity of time. And according to the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, the US is expected to eliminate land-based missile silos, reduce the number of launch tubes on its missile submarines, and also limit its inventory of nuclear-capable bombers in coming years. But the way one can discern the trend from the behavioral patterns and the doctrinal changes which really has happened, especially in the last few years, do not reflect these many commitments are going to be adhered to in the foreseeable future. Russia again has also deployed a number of strategic warheads. It has obviously a number of these nuclear warheads as the non-deployed strategic warheads, and also it has tactical nuclear warheads. So they still have been holding a number of nuclear warheads in their inventories. At the same time, both the United States and Russia retain thousands of retired warheads planned for dismantlement. The new START treaty, which in fact is being debated across the globe, especially in the context of this reduction of nuclear warheads, which again has now a history of roughly 3 years because it entered into force in February 2011. I think very minimum number, let me say the estimate which suggests that the US has been able to reduce only 146 strategic warheads and 90 launchers under this treaty. In Russia's case, the number is lower in comparison to the US. So what exactly I am arguing is that on the one hand, we have been seeing this politics of bilateral reduction, but on the other hand, still because of the lot of doctrinal and behavioral patterns, doctrinal issues and behavioral patterns, there is no correlation, especially one which one can explore, that they really have been trying to obviously de-emphasize on the role of nuclear weapons, or they put less reliance on nuclear weapons. In fact, President Obama, during his speech in Berlin last year, categorically made a statement that progress on nuclear reductions will require more successful engagement with Russia. But again, this is being seen as a part of the larger rhetoric, which the US obviously has from time to time been, in fact, signaling to the rest of the world, and there is no commitment towards any of these rhetoric. If one reviews the United States and Russia's nuclear weapons employment strategy, it will be by and large similar. In fact, one salience which one can really see, that keep talking about nuclear reductions, but at the same time keep or put more and more reliance on nuclear weapons in their strategy. There seems to be a lot of rhetorics in posturing, like the declaration made by President Obama that the United States could reduce its deployed strategic nuclear arsenal down to about 1,000 warheads if Russia is willing to make similar reductions. Again is question of, at the bilateral level, in fact, what politics dictates the behavioral pattern, that has become the real issue. And the declaration that move beyond Cold War nuclear postures. So one can see that there is certainly a need to seek bold reductions in the US and Russian tactical weapons, and that again is one of the posturing which the President Obama in fact gave or articulated in his address. But at the same time, how long the US and Russia will take to completely reduce the deployed nuclear warheads remains a question before the international community. Reciprocity from both sides obviously will help in achieving this, and obviously the other acknowledged nuclear weapon countries will follow suit, because they still hold very less number of nuclear warheads in comparison to the US and Russia. The US has very clearly articulated the broad shifts in US military planning on nuclear weapons. Russia too has been showing enough evidence to stick to its reliance on nuclear weapons in the emerging geopolitical equation. Crimea issue, if one can analyze in the current context, especially it's only a couple of weeks story, and the way it has been annexed is a case in point, and the annexation has certainly wielded negative ramifications for the new START treaty because of the posturing which is now being seen, which is getting reflected in all the major policy statements coming from either Putin or President Obama, that clearly says their overall posturing and the emphasis on the role of nuclear weapons. We obviously see a continuity in US nuclear planning. Their assertion and acknowledgement that disarmament remains as a long-term goal does not serve any meaning as far as nuclear weapon free world is concerned. The US keeps talking about the nuclear triad and its growing salience. So again, we don't see that there is going to be any shift in terms of the US approaches towards again the decreasing salience of the nuclear weapons. So again, we see that more and more reliance on the nuclear weapons obviously is featuring in almost all the declaratory statement in a very categorical terms in all their strategy. So where is the semblance between rhetoric and action? I think the US and Russia really need to explain to the international community exactly what exactly is their overall approach, or what is going to be the foreseeable future, especially with regard to the complete elimination of nuclear weapons, which again is the overall dream of the international community. The US retains preemption as a key strategy, and hence the priority of retaining counter-force targeting of military and industrial assets is seen in all their major statements, and that again is one of the disturbing trend, and it is not new, it really has been happening over the years. And the military by and large continues to plan for nuclear war fighting in both the US and Russia. It is ironical that the United States make nuclear employment plans even during the failure of deterrence. Even in fact, the strategy which the US keeps talking about, that in the case of the failure of deterrence, in fact, that reflects that they do not have much faith in nuclear deterrence, because they keep talking about the requirement of more and more of nuclear forces. They keep talking about a variety of nuclear forces which can really underpin the larger nuclear triad. Let me stress on the fact that the US maintains a commitment to a strategic parity with Russia as the only peer in nuclear weapons capabilities. The upgrading of all nuclear weapon systems by the current regime signifies their dependence, and there is no move to signal, again on the point which I have made, the de-emphasis on the role of nuclear weapons. It must be pointed out here that the indefinite deployment of the nuclear weapon carries a high risk of their ultimate use through accident or inadvertence. The only complete defense against such catastrophe is the elimination of nuclear weapons and the assurance that they will never be produced again. The US, instead of changing its stance, began designing new, more reliable nuclear weapons to replace its aging stockpile. And that program, again, all of you are aware that how the replacement of reliable warhead program really had taken off. A lot of debates had happened, especially in terms of how they were finding a successor to this nuclear stockpile stewardship program, which was again debated during the whole decade of 90s. The US has called for maintaining an offensive nuclear posture with weapons on high alert and professes the legal right to make preemptive nuclear strikes when it suspects a WMD attack, even against non-nuclear states. And that is again a very, very important point to examine. Such shift has challenged the very foundations of nuclear arms reduction. And in that context, one has to really see that if the US is really serious and believes in the consistency between the rhetoric and action, then it must initiate the following. 1. Stop restructuring its design and production facilities. Ask all their national laboratories, whether it is Los Alamos, Lawrence Livermore, Sandia National Laboratories, and not to begin research on new nuclear weapons. Because there is a now new rigor which is really put, especially by the US administration, to put lot of emphasis on the R&D on the new nuclear weapons, and Los Alamos is taking the lead in that. Modernization of nuclear warheads to execute nuclear strikes with a new generation of nuclear weapons that have additional capabilities. That again has to be seen if they are really serious. Eliminate all tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, because as you know that a number of tactical nuclear weapons have been deployed in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey, and unless and until, and even to one of the acknowledged nuclear weapon states, the United Kingdom. And if obviously the US is serious, I think the US shall take a very drastic measure in terms of taking a bold decision in eliminating all tactical nuclear weapons in Europe. NPT requires obviously to be strengthened, it is obvious, and that is a real worry. And it can be strengthened only when the United States in particular fulfills the obligations made in the Article 6. There is no other way. The US nuclear doctrine has weakened the NPT regime technically because of their emphasis on the role of nuclear weapons. So on the one hand, they keep talking about the non-proliferation regime. On the other hand, they keep putting a lot of salience on the role of nuclear weapons. And that is what is weakening the non-proliferation regime. Because that is again providing a lot of impetus for the other signatories, the so-called new nuclear nations which we keep talking about. And that is obviously a very serious issue for the international community. The US requires to de-alert all the nuclear weapon and start understanding the relevance of no first use doctrine. Because once it really understands the relevance of no first use doctrine, I think there will be obviously a movement forward in terms of putting less and less emphasis on the role of nuclear weapons. So I think the time has come that now there shall be a universal no first use policy adhered by all the acknowledged nuclear weapon states. To conclude, I will say that each country must seize its nuclear weapons program, the military component of it, and destroy existing arsenals. Thank you for your patiently hearing and time.